Well, welcome back to Sefton Motors. As you can see, we're starting this update from the mountains of Colorado. We're at Chautauqua Park in Boulder, Colorado, right on the front range in front of the Flatirons. Got an exciting update for you today. What we want to do is we want to introduce the Addy, which is our update to the Melvin engine. The Addy is about half the size as the Melvin, and it has a baseline of 2 kilowatts of power. We're going to take you through the different pieces of the Addy engine and talk to you about our timing, where we're at, where things are going, and we'll hope you enjoy the update from the sunny confines of Colorado. Look at that beautiful mountain range. Incredible. There's some power in those mountains. Unbelievable power. Just like a heat engine, just like a Stirling engine. Find the power, release it. Thank you. We'll talk to you on the other side.
Right, and here's the Addy. It is quite a bit smaller than the Melvin, but it's still a large engine. The major difference between it and the Melvin, besides its size, is that it's a gamma style, as you can see here. The power piston's offset from the displacer cylinder. This just allows us to reduce the size of the engine a little bit, the length of it. That big gold thing on top is just an accumulator tank, as we have a baseline of 40 psi for the engine. But the red part is the hot end of the engine. The back section of the engine will be the cool part. We dropped a man in so you can see the relative size to a regular sized person. It is not quite a tabletop model, but it is considerably smaller than the Melvin engine is today. Let's take you through some of the parts of the engine, talk a little bit about it, tell you what we're thinking on its fabrication. On the hot end, you'll see we have fins, but the fins are not just individual fins. It's a spiral flight that we'll be using for this heat transfer section of the engine. And then underneath that, you'll see a similar design of the displacer with the nipple design to increase the geometric area for heating and cooling. And then we'll come back and have the same thing on the cold side of the engine. And then off to the right, you'll see the piston is connected through a port to the displacer cylinder. Both the displacer and the piston cylinders are about 7.5 inches in diameter. The piston cylinder, that will be a aluminum tube, and we're thinking we can use a relatively standardized aluminum tube for that, and just to finish the inside to cut down on some of the machining costs associated with that component. And the piston, we're still going to strive to make it a 3D piston, and but the rings will be a little bit different. We'll have 3 rings up towards the top of the head, and then 1 riding ring on the bottom of the head. All right, let's go ahead and get back into the back end of the engine a little bit. Once again, the gold tank is just an accumulator tank that we have up there to help maintain the pressure. As we go back, we can see the kinematics linkage, the connecting the piston rod coming back into the kinematics, which is just a simple bell crank mechanism. But the bell crank mechanism is on our offset pivot axle, just to reduce the length of the engine overall as best we can. And then each of the connecting rods is connected to a linear slide, which will help minimize the amount of non-linear travel for both the piston rod and the displacer rod. Up at the top, you're going to see 2 rotors. We're going to use brake rotors, 18-inch brake rotors instead of flywheels here. And swing around to the other side for a minute. We'll see the displacer side, and I'll get rid of this. Let me get rid of this guy. And you can see the slide here for the displacer arms also, and also a bearing cage for the displacer bearings that'll be in that little box in there. All right, let's take it apart a little bit. All right, first let's go ahead and pull off that flight, or think of an auger, heat fins in the accumulator tank, which will be about a 5-gallon tank. Now we'll take off the displacer, which will be a 3-piece displacer, stainless on the hot end and aluminum on the cold end. The piston, once again, we'll strive for a 3D printed piston. then we'll have another flight of cooling fins for the cold end, and that will pretty much define the engine itself.
All right, let's end with a little FaceTime with numbers and dates. We're still working on this. We have no parts made for this engine yet. We're working on that. Some of the parts we're looking at being outsourced, some of the more complicated parts like the displacer and maybe the fins, heating and cooling fins. We're working on getting those quotes in place now. We're looking at more facilities. They're just so much more expensive than in Detroit. Our estimates for pricing on this particular engine, we're expecting the parts to be about $2,000 to get the parts all assembled and put together. And then on top of that, labor of about $1,500 more. So somewhere between $35,000 to $5,000 is our estimate for pricing. I know that's a pretty wide range, but we still have a lot of work to do before we narrow that down. But we will pass that along as things become more firm on this particular engine model. But once again, it's probably about half the size of the Melvin in length. It's under 300 pounds of weight. Now, one other thing we haven't talked about, but we're pretty excited about, is the firebox. We're looking to design the firebox so it can sustain a 6-hour wood burn without tending, where we'd have an automated type of feed for the wood going into the firebox. So I'm pretty excited about that. We haven't done any testing on it, of course, but it looks promising. And we would have a dual input once the gas and also the wood as far as consumables for that firebox. And we will update you as that progresses also alongside with the engine, with the base engine. But that's about that about does it. Please send us any questions you might have, any suggestions or ideas. We always love to hear those, and we will see you around the next time. All right, bye-bye.